Hello and welcome everyone to our Replatforming to Umbraco webinar today. Why are organizations moving to Umbraco and what it takes to get there? My name is Nicholas Durrant. I'm the MD of Bluegrass Digital, and today I've got Heather Burns, Senior Solutions Engineer, and Simon Bierger, our Technical Director from Bluegrass. Hello everyone, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you.
So what is driving organizations to rethink their digital platforms right now? There's a lot of movement in the market as we speak, and there are a number of reasons why companies are looking to re-platform. It could be things like end-of-life platforms. It could be security or also upgrade limitations because of end-of-life. And then licensing and operational costs. So, questioning really what the value is and the cost of ownership of managing these platforms. And then performance and scalability, and then there's publishing frustration from content teams. So I don't know what you're seeing around those sort of factors. I mean, Heather or Simon, have you got anything to add with that to that?
I Yeah, absolutely. Every single one that's been listed there has been a major comment, especially from other competitors or just from clients looking at different CMSs. A big thing they're talking about is DXP. They're looking for specific components, but they don't want all of the bells and whistles. They might need certain aspects, which does add into the flexibility and scalability that you've listed there. That is a huge one. Same with end of life support for the CMS and for the upgrading of platforms has definitely been a big topic of conversation, as that takes up time for the devs, and the content editors feel that pain as well whenever those changes are made. So yeah, I can definitely say they're all very common and reasons for people moving from place to place.
Yeah, I think from my side, I mean, you both hit the nail on the head, really. It's seldom one particular issue. It's generally this build-up of friction across the business where, your content's not getting out fast enough, or the costs are just too high to justify the overheads and the maintenance. And, these big enterprise platforms come with huge costs, not just the licensing fees, it's also ongoing maintenance, and simplifying their digital pipelines is something I think we're seeing a lot of clients coming to us with. They don't need all of the bells and whistles, as you said, Heather. They might need very complex parts, but they just need parts. They don't need everything in this big, huge ecosystem. So a lot of people, it's just a misalignment. I mean, those big enterprise platforms still work in some cases, but it's just not for everyone, and that friction builds up, and the teams start looking for change.
When organizations begin exploring alternative, I mean, you mentioned obviously the cost of ownership factor there. Where does Umbraco typically come into the conversation? I mean, with customers as a platform, when they're doing the vendor comparisons, what are we seeing it is an option for customers?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends. There's a lot of different experiences we have with customers that come to us, or that we send out requests for quotations for. It varies from customers who already know about Umbraco and are interested in it as an option, and then it's generally quite easy to bring it into the conversation. It's a platform we certainly enjoy using, both from a development and a content management perspective. It's a nice platform to be on, and it's certainly punching in the enterprise space these days with all the newer features and add-ons you can get that fill some of those gaps. So it's no longer just a nice friendly CMS platform. It's a serious contender in the enterprise space. So it's very easy to bring it into just about any conversations, because your costs of ownership can be kind of flexible in terms of what you want them to be. It could just be a fire and forget, just have your CMS and your front end over there, and quietly manage your content for the next few years. Or it could be the full experience, a headless solution with proper marketing tooling with like Umbraco Engage or Forms or workflow, all these other additional packages that you can add on to bring that full featured enterprise experience. So the flexibility gives you that ability to bring it into a lot of different conversations across the board, which is very helpful. It means it fits a lot of use cases just by virtue of that flexibility. It's also something that I think certainly enterprise clients are more comfortable with than typical free CMSs. The open source CMSs outside of Umbraco, that landscape, the Drupals and WordPresses, and they're often seen as less secure than than a .NET C# oriented framework. I mean, practically speaking, we've seen that to WordPress because most of the internet is the most highly targeted platform as well.
What platforms are we seeing organizations moving away from when we looking at an Umbraco replatform? I know we've just completed a project now moving an enterprise customer away from Adobe Experience Manager. I don't know, is it across the board, or are there specific platforms that clients are moving away from to Umbraco in your experience?
Yeah, definitely Optimizely and Sitecore have been quite common ones that have popped up recently. WordPress also comes into conversations frequently. Definitely the first two, mainly from like an end of life perspective for Sitecore, they can get very costly. The main topic of conversation is not just the additional licenses, but having to do that migration is quite a bear for a lot of companies and for the developers as well. Same with Optimizely. I had a client one time a wee while ago say that we had a Ferrari, but we were really looking for a Honda. So like sometimes, like as Simon says, that enterprise level you can have that Ferrari, you can afford it, and it does work the way it's supposed to. But due to the needs of that said client, they were more looking for something that was a Honda that fitted better, required some more flexibility for them to be able to do that. So yeah, that's what we're looking
And
at.
I suppose going back to some of those earlier points, you're talking around cost of ownership. They require certain skill sets as well and experience to maintain those platforms, which sometimes are not that easy to get. And as far as Umbraco goes, it's got a good community and ecosystem. Obviously it's a .NET application, as you say, but also there. And although it's open source, it also has the option to upgrade to a more kind of enterprise support package. It gives companies or larger organizations that ability to almost enterprise and enable it if they so choose. I mean, we find that some of our customers want to buy those packages as well. Okay, so I mean, when companies are looking to make the move, they've done their vendor choice, they've selected Umbraco. What are the key things really when it comes to replatforms? Everyone talks around migrating away from a platform. The reality is, it's in most cases a platform or a rebuild. So often it comes together with a redesign process at the same time. But if it's the typical lift and shift, it's very much more rebuild, if we want to call it that, when you replatform than not. What are the important things really to think about when preparing to replatform a site to Umbraco, for example?
I mean, there's obviously quite a broad question. I mean, there's a lot of things that are very important that are seldom thought about early on in any new project, but particularly in a replatforming move. You tend to have, we call it replatforming, but like you said, it's very often a rebuild. You'll have a lot of your current site, a lot of components, a lot of pages, and that's probably drifted from what it was originally intended to be already. It's probably content all over the place and repetition and things. And I think a lot of clients, they tend to think about, the content as a sort of predictable mass, but it's generally a lot messier than you think it's going to be. I mean, you might have a list of news articles that is easy enough to reason about, but all your other content will tend to be made up of lots of different blocks and pages and various different things depending on how it's been architected. And that's very hard to just lift and shift and migrate away. But it also, I think a lot of teams don't think from a content perspective, figure out what you actually want to take across, what you need as a team, not just, let's push everything over as it is now and then we can fix it all later. If you do that, you're going to have all the same problems you already have with your current content strategies and platforms. You're not going to have a better time of it because you're just bringing across all your problems too. I mean, the platform can only go so far. How you thought about your content and structured your pages and your architecture is so much more important than your underlying platform choice from a day-to-day management perspective and an ongoing maintenance perspective. That is such a critical part of the phase that I think a lot of teams both underestimate and simply don't do. Just we're replatforming, let's just move it all as is. And you'll just end up with the same pain in a different place.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It is a very tough question to answer. I've I talk to clients who come to us who are then looking to work with a partner like your lovely self, especially from an end of life perspective. Like they're coming from a vendor who they're wanting to, lift and shift. And it's a terrible answer all the time just to say it depends. It depends on their custom code. It depends on if they're coming from Umbraco before. Are they using PHP? Are they on Drupal or WordPress? That is a very important information to know of where they're starting and where they want to go. Sometimes when talking to clients, from going through their solution of what they're looking for, listening to their pains, and you're absolutely spot on, Simon, where you might have the same things if we're not going to really peel back the layers to understand why we have these pains. If it's in the back office, it might be a complete redo, even if they wanted to keep certain aspects, but it would just take too much work. It'd be too complicated because maybe they have legacy code, or the person who originally created the website no longer works for the company. So that part is also small factors that sometimes aren't considered, which can add to costs and whatnot. So typically with Umbraco, to add in back in there, Nick, when talking about the enterprise support aspect, I always recommend they push over to ARC advising or code review with a partner to look into specific pieces that they really want to keep, and then see how that could be translated into Umbraco CMS and be that friendly CMS to help them with that migration for best practice. So it really is it depends on so many factors for migration.
I mean, often when clients come to us with an existing platform, and one of the first steps we take in the process is a platform audit. So we do obviously carry that out just to understand the technical architecture, and as both you and Simon mentioned, the content model around everything. So that tends to kickstart the planning process. So in some ways, it's very much like the typical implementation. If it was greenfield or replatform, it very much follows a very similar kind of project workflow. From that perspective, the content is a big critical piece because you need to extract it from the existing CMS, and obviously look at the migration side as part of it.
Yeah, I think another big part that teams underestimate is the and you touched on it, Heather, the custom code, the third-party integrations, the things that maybe have just been running forever and no one really necessarily understands, or the person's left, and mapping those and understanding who's responsible for them and the moving parts and how it would look to migrate them. If you're going to understand anything early on beyond just the content model, that's probably the most critical one, because that's what can add weeks worth of pain later on if you've not fully understood it from the beginning.
Simon or Heather, what sort of challenges do you generally encounter with the replatform? Where are those risks we need to kind of manage as we go through a project like that?
Yeah, I mean, it probably applies to any project, whether you're planning it migrating to Umbraco or something else. But I think oftentimes, and I think I've kind of touched on this before, but teams are aiming for full parity with their existing website. They want to be able to do everything that they can currently do on the new platform. And I think that tends to be a mistake. Usually you want to bring across, your core experience and then expand from there in later phases and take a phased approach to delivery. But oftentimes, especially some of the bigger enterprise clients, they want all the bells and whistles right off the bat. And that can mean you make some of the wrong decisions before you've even gotten the thing out there in front of people. I think, they're not derailed by one particular thing, but it's more around trying to do too much too soon as part of the first delivery, and also being too vague about some important parts of the scope. So getting the scope tied up early on, and making sure it's a manageable, reasonable initial delivery is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I would add to that. Well, they're kind of put into two groups. You've got developers, and then you have the editors, admin, who go into the site on the daily. For developers, for them to have best practice, to understand the Umbraco back office, the jargon. It might be slightly different from another CMS that they're working with. That's where somewhere like Discord, those communities come in incredibly handy. I've spoken to partners of their developers who said that's been immensely helpful, which is the joy of being open source. From the content editor side of things, I think sometimes we forget that those people are not always very technical, and there can be quite an emotional aspect to it, to where it can be quite stressful. They don't know that system, it's new. So I think making sure that they have training in place themselves, or they have been introduced to the platform once it's set up, just so they understand the ways of the workings of the new CMS and the flow. Some things will be very similar, but when it comes to adding a new page, or their workflow might be just ever so slightly different. So I think that they both, to make sure it's a successful migration, they both have to be taken care of in different aspects, in different preparations, at different times throughout that timeline of the migration. So that's something I have seen and have put into practice with certain clients to make sure that they're all included in this process.
And just talking about Umbraco, I mean, you mentioned there obviously the editing experience, the non-technical user. We know Umbraco is dubbed the friendly CMS. We've got a great reputation for having a great editing experience. But what else can Umbraco for the customers, in terms of they made the choice of Umbraco? What does the roadmap look like for Umbraco?
Fantastic question. So the big one that has been up and with everyone is AI, of course. That's been a big push for especially the user interface side of things. So on Umbraco's roadmap now, it's become very strong contender to make sure that AI can be integrated into the CMS. Going off of version 17, you can have Umbraco AI, still in its beta versions, of course, but from there, it still has that flexibility. It's open source, so you can choose your different models, because we understand that different customers may use Gemini or Copilot, or, there's all those different types of AI agents that people may want to use, different models. So that has been a really big shift for Umbraco in their roadmap. I would say as well, a new feature coming out is global blocks. That is very much for the editors, to where they can have almost their own library of different blocks that they've used, and then they can edit those and then change them in the different pages. Again, just to give them a bit more flexibility, and I give the developer some additional time to go have a cup of tea. So I would say that's kind of what you're looking at there so far. But it's the joy of Umbraco and her roadmap is that we love to listen to partners and to developers and customers as to what they want to see. And the roadmap is not frigid to where, nope, this will be done here. Like, we can push these things forward if people want them more, or push things back if it's not as interesting for other people. So we love to hear feedback and what people want to see from Umbraco, and that is influential on our roadmap. So.
Great. And there's also these tools like Engage, which obviously helps with personalization and add additional products that can get added to the store.
Yes.
Heather, you obviously mentioned those points, but also there's the additional kind of add-on features that many people don't know about, like Umbraco Engage offer. It gives it that DXP sort of enabled experience customers.
Yeah, absolutely. It can start with just the CMS, and you can expand your Umbraco ecosystem, pick and choose. Again, that ties back to licensing fees. You only pay for what you want, and something like Umbraco Engage is broken down. So if you just want analytics, then you would just pay for that. If you're wanting, again, all the bells and whistles of Umbraco Engage with the personalization 360 profile, go for that one. So yes, they are there to enhance. They are integrated into the CMS, so you don't have to jump from, platform to platform in that regard. Still keeps that same mindset of flexibility, to where you get all the data, you control how you want your data to be used, and everything to that nature. With Umbraco Forms as well, you're spot on, that ties in. I mean, that's been with Umbraco for a very long time, quite a legacy package is our Umbraco Forms, so you can apply it to multiple different platforms and CRMs, again, to make it more realistic for your clients, to where they use forms, but we need them to go off to Salesforce, for example, to jot this all down, or if it has to go over to a PIM or something like that. There's also Umbraco Commerce, Umbraco Workflow, if you're just looking to enhance the editor's experience a bit more. If there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen, that's a really solid one. There's a free and then there's a paid version of those packages. So yeah, these are some things I don't think people know about, that there's even flexibility within the licenses of our add-ons, so you can test them out to see if this does fit your systems. I will say, imagine getting to test it out for a wee while to see if this is a good fit for you. And if it's not, then, you don't have to. It's not the end of the world. You can choose something else. So we understand that people have to pick and choose packages that fit them and fit their expertise, their skill sets. And that might not be Umbraco, but we want to make sure that our CMS in the back office has that opportunity to where you can connect to something that you feel more comfortable in. That comes under the friendly side of things.
Yeah, I think that talks to the API first sort of world we're moving towards. Obviously, composable is a big term that's used quite widely these days. We see it in a lot of new RFPs and new briefs because the architecture needs to be more plug and play rather than being traditional kind of implementation. So, I mean, Umbraco from an API perspective, I mean, it's very much API first. Headless solutions are becoming more and more the commonplace these days with new builds or even replatforms. Umbraco is a very modern CMS from that perspective. Am I right?
Yes, yeah. Well, you have the management APIs in the back office. You can, even with some of our packages, you can make them entirely headless. Engage has a headless API property editor, I believe, for you to be able to extend off. So yes, you're absolutely right. We build our packages to what the market is saying a lot of the time. So if people are more pushing for headless API, then we're going to make sure that feature is built in or it's there as an option, but you don't have to use it if you don't want to. So you're spot on. That has been a massive conversation across the board. Everyone wants to go headless and then adds into load balancing or changing up their front end. It's a big wave on that.
Yeah, we've seen that too with the push towards headless, and I think it's not flashy, but the architectural changes to Umbraco in the last couple of versions towards an API first architecture with the management APIs and the content delivery APIs and then the management APIs has been huge for a more extensible platform. And we've actually seen it, with the release of Umbraco AI and just general package development for Umbraco. The way things have been structured have clearly been thought through quite well, and that there are a lot of extension points within both the back office and the APIs that make it quite easy to add things on like Umbraco AI, I think. And that, while the team probably didn't know that was going to be a thing when they were constructing the new extension points, I think it's bared good fruit from an Umbraco perspective. And yeah, the design decisions, I think, recently have been good and make it a very good long-term bet, in my opinion.
So I think we'll wrap it up there with the final point of AI being the hot subject at the moment. So I think with many platforms, including Umbraco, they've really keeping their finger on the pulse in terms of how AI can help both the editing experience and the developer experience going forward. So on that note, I will like to thank you both Heather Burns from Umbraco and Simon Buger from Bluegrass Digital for this quick discussion today. And if anyone's interested, please reach out to Bluegrass, myself, Nicholas Durrant. I can help you set up any demos with Umbraco if that's something you're looking to do. Hope to see you soon at one of our next webinars.